Welcome to this episode of What I Want to Show You. I'm Char. I'm a teacher, administrator, and education leader who lives in the United States along the shores of Lake Erie near Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm passionate about making learning connections where others may not see them in order to close learning gaps and support all learners. One of those connections was how to use generative AI like ChatGPT in the world of education, and that is how I met Laura. Hello, Laura.
Hi, Char. I'm Laura. I'm in the beautiful Cape Town, which is very, very hot today in South Africa. And I've been in education in one form or another for many years. I've recently become more and more interested in how we can use AI to revolutionize education. And I'm very glad that I got to meet Char in the process of that. And here we are today.
So we're going to spend the next 30 minutes sharing what we want to show you at the intersection of ideas and experiences. We realize that despite our very different backgrounds, locations, and experiences, we've had a lot of commonalities we didn't expect. So we thought that you might have some as well, and we'd like to share ours with you. And before we get started, Laura, I am holding in my hand a Nestle Peppermint Crisp Bar. It's in a green package, and it's got a picture of what looks like a chocolate bar, but with like green stuff on the inside of it. And on the side, it says mint crackle coated in milk chocolate confection. And I've been waiting for them to come on Amazon because we were sharing like local treats and things that are slightly different. And you started talking about this chocolate treat as something that you grew up on. So if you're hearing the crinkling, it's me opening this package and taking out a segment of my chocolate peppermint crisp. All right.
It's also been a staple of tarts, to top tarts made by grannies for centuries. Okay, probably not for centuries, but that's how it feels. Every
Really?
granny ever they grate them and put them on top of tarts. The tarts with a biscuit base and a moussey kind of creamy inside.
All right, so I could grate this and put it on top of my holiday baking.
You could, but it's a refrigerated tart that you put it on top of. Yeah.
I see. All right, so I'm looking at it. It's got a green hard candy looking interior and the chocolate, and I'm taking a bite.
Okay, so you're not putting a face of horror. I wish everybody here could see your face because it looks generally quite happy.
No, it's actually really tasty. You get this crunchy with just a little bit of sticky, kind of a light peppermint. It's not a heavy peppermint center, the hard candy part. It's when you bite into it though, it's not like biting into a hard candy because it didn't like crunch. I felt like I could bite through it, but now it's got kind of a toffee after like chew with just such a thin coating of chocolate on it. In the US, so many of our candy bars that have centers in them, the chocolate layer around it is pretty thick.
So the reason you can bite through the center is because it's actually a lot of layers of thin sheets of hard candy. It's not one solid thing. And that's why it sticks in your teeth as well.
No, I can see that when I look at it up close. All right, I would say that these are delicious.
I'm so glad because they're part of my childhood. Okay.
All right, so we're talking about things that are part of our childhood. And like making this connection between you and I. My grandmother always had ribbon candies in a dish on the table in her front room. So ribbon candies are thin, hard candies that are cut into strips. I don't know, maybe 3 centimeters wide at the most, maybe 2 centimeters. And then they're like folded to look like ribbons. And they come in a variety of colors and flavors, and they're very festive. And so she always had like ribbon candy for these holidays. And it reminds me of the green peppermint layer here because it's not a hard candy when you bite into it because it's such thin layers. you can bite through it easily and then get like the candy flavor in your mouth. It reminds me of these things. And I always think about my grandma when I think about those ribbon candies. So this whole idea of bringing experiences in, we left off in our last conversation kind of with this topic that we should be able to see students as a primary learning resource in our classroom. That like we're not the only learning resource, that the children themselves are a learning resource because they're bringing their own perspectives and lenses and things with them into the space and like co-building learning with us. What do you think about that? Because this is a topic that we've been dwelling on.
So it's kind of very closely related to the whole flipped classroom idea, which has been around for a really long time. But I've never actually seen it in practice. I've spoken, I mean, I had 12 years of schooling. I have a family, children in my orbit, and I have never in my life, I asked them about their school experience and so on. I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen a participatory experience. If they do, it's in a language class, they're allowed to maybe have a discussion to learn a second language. That's about as far as it goes. And what I'm really excited about is that I think that AI has the opportunity, it has a possibility of actually disrupting education as we know it. And it can take this idea, reframe it, marry it to AI, integrate it, and become something new. Because the truth of the matter is, I don't think education works as it is now. I don't think it's learning. I don't think it's the same thing. I think that it's remained largely unchanged since, I mean, Little House on the Prairie. It was pretty much the same as it was in my experience. I don't know, when was Laura Ingalls Wilder alive and she wrote Little House on the Prairie?
1800s.
Right. So it's pretty much, I could relate to everything there because it was the same experience. And I think it's time that we stopped. There are these lovely progressive theories, but that's all they are. And I'm really hoping that we can take this opportunity and not just change the whiteboards, blackboards into whiteboards, into digital whiteboards, but actually integrate this and try to do this and actually see our students as resources and really leverage all these lovely ideas that we've had for many years, but enhance them with AI.
We've used the word augmented, and as you're talking about this, if we're building a different way of thinking about a learning system and a learning environment with augmented as the center of it, then I almost see in my mind kind of these interlocking circles. So you have generative AI as a tool to augment the work because it has the capabilities to help teachers and help students to frame their ideas, to make connections to things that are important to them, to push on thinking and suggest questions and strategies, to give feedback. It has that capacity. Teachers in that interlocking circle are bringing their own interests and their own expertise with them to the classroom and can use generative AI to augment that, but then also can use it as a tool to open doors for students to be active participants in building the learning. So then you have students in that third circle, and the students are bringing their own prior knowledge with them, their own experiences with them, their own questions with them. And if all three of them co-create in the space the learning, maybe the teacher is identifying based on what the students are sharing and the skills we know people need to continue to build and grow as learners. So the teacher brings that to the space, the students bring their interests and background knowledge, and generative AI helps to marry those things. So that all three of them are important to the learning and the kinds of learning that can take place. Whether it's identifying a problem and working together to solve a problem or create a new solution or a new idea, or to analyze existing information or to see connections where they've not seen them before. Like, all of those things can happen in a classroom where all three components in that model are valued and are seen as equal. You don't ever want to say that a tech tool is an equal partner in work, but as an equal component within the learning that's going to take place, not a sidebar thing, but a, we couldn't do this without you thing. Like, we couldn't do this without you students. We couldn't do this without you teacher. We couldn't do this without you generative AI. Like, all three of us together were necessary to accomplish this thing that we've just done.
Yes, I love your idea of the interlocking circles because it's given me a very clear mental image of exactly what you mean. I also think if we talk about, so a lot of these alternative or more progressive ideas, one of the prerequisites for them is highly trained educators. And there are a lot of fantastic teachers out there, but a lot of them are quite steeped in traditional pedagogical kind of methods. And then also, if you think of, I mean, me being in South Africa, there are a lot of under-resourced schools. So we don't have a lot of training, and there are a lot of teachers, under-resourced schools, but there are a few teachers and under-trained teachers. And I mean, they do the best they can, but the best you can without adequate training and ongoing training is not necessarily what you need to make this work. But not with AI. If teachers can partner with AI, it just becomes this magical partnership where they can unlock so much more, and they can actually have this role without it meaning, because before, I mean, it's been so much more work, but without actually burning out.
Right. We've talked about that before, that kind of self-care component. And, teachers are teachers because they see connections in learning. They have tools on their own for being a learner and are efficient at it and enjoy seeing that spark of learning in the students that they're working with. And I think enjoy working with colleagues who are interested in that kind of collaborative conversation and, pushing on you thinking. I had a colleague like that. I called her the other half of my brain. I mean, we taught across the hall from each other, and regularly we're meeting in the hall almost at the same time with like this spark of an idea, like, well, what if we did this? How would that look? What might that look like? How could we do that? What would we want our students to be able to do? What would we need to pull this off? So I think the spark is there for teachers. I think maybe it's a matter of working with administrators and systems to put in place safe spaces for teachers to do that, and where that's valued, and then honoring that, knowing that in that kind of co-creating learning space, and there's a lot of research to support some of this, that in those co-creating learning spaces, there's going to be struggle, and there's going to be iterations like, well, we did this, and what was the outcome? What did we bring from this? What are we going to take with us to this next thing? But the fun of doing that, I think there's where teachers feel the burnout and where students feel the burnout, because when you lose that fun of discovering a new idea, or that aha moment, or the, oh, I figured that out. That was an interesting puzzle. Let's spend some time struggling with it. Like, this is fun. When you lose that, then learning doesn't spark joy anymore. I mean, that's what we talked about the last time. And I think we stopped seeing each other as resources. Now we're in a space and we're doing our job and the students are doing their job. And we might have some technology that will help us do our job, but we see it as doing its job. And I think that's where we've landed after the pandemic. It's just, I'm going to do this. I need to get through this. I'm going to get this done. I'm going to do this job. And the kids are like, I'm going to go to school and I'm going to do these things and I'm going to get this done. I've done this job. And the tech sits on the sidelines when if we took a breath, it could be just part of the work together.
So I was in, when I was very little, I was in what they called an experimental school. I had to leave because we moved, but I was heartbroken. And I loved going to school. It was for 2 years, I really loved school. I used to cry on the last day of term because I didn't want it to be holidays. I was very little, so, you know. But they would, it was totally different to normal schools. They would, for example, we were still little, so they'd give us like a task to do, and then we could go sit on the field if we wanted to and do it in groups. Or they would let us act things out. For art class, they let us paint the windows of the school with Christmas themed stuff or Hanukkah themed or whatever we wanted, because at the end of the year, like the school's windows, you know. And then they would have, whereas the other schools I attended, we had indoctrination classes. They would say, we did. I mean, you know how it is for religion. There was basically, they would go, okay, these are the religion. They would, over the intercom this morning, we are doing these different religions in these classes. So we'll be having classes on Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, whatever. A whole long list. These are the classes you can go to. You can go to any class you want, and you can learn about the religion. You don't get indoctrinated. There are no, you know, you learn about it. And it was the whole idea was exactly, you were supposed to go and learn about different religions and everything. So that was, I would have loved to see more of that. So I said I hadn't seen the flipped classroom, and it wasn't quite that because we were still very little. But it apparently they phased it out, they changed it, and I don't understand why. I mean, I would love to see kids that excited about going to school. Why is it a chore? Why does it have to be this painful experience? And people seem to think it's normal. Like you tell your parents you hate school, and they're like, yeah, well, I hated school too. It's just something you have to go through. It doesn't need to be that way.
And I think we can build on so many of the examples that I know are there that I've seen where kids are excited about coming to school to do this activity or to work through this project or to be in this space. And I think that often what we miss is the reason why they're so excited. You know, you're an instructional designer and I'm a curriculum expert. And so we've spent a good deal of our professional lives writing lesson materials and instructional activities and assessment tools and putting all these pieces in place. And I think none of those things really are what spark that interest for kids. What sparks the interest is that they see some connection between what it is that they're going to be working with and something that's important to them or new to them or interesting to them or innovative to them. And back to my interlocking circles, like if that circle, if we're going to co-create things, then all three of those circles should have the potential to spark those learning opportunities. So it could be the students bringing it, you know, we've seen this, we've read about this, we've tried this, we looked at this, we want to dig more into this. So maybe they start the learning. And then in this co-model, the teacher says, well, here are some skills that I think you already know that can help you with this. And here are some skills that I think that along the way we'll need to be learning together so that you can push further on this. And the generative AI tool says, well, now that we've identified those skills, let me cast them for you in the frame that the students are wanting to work in. So if we know these are the skills, then here, let me suggest some avenues that you could follow that would get you all going in this direction that are interesting to you. Or the generative AI may be the spark for something. Maybe it is being used as a thought partner to ask questions or to identify blind spots like, hey, we've done these things. Well, have you considered this? Have you thought about this? Well, gosh, no, we hadn't. Let's take that further. Or it could be the teacher saying, I think we've done these things before, but I'm seeing this connection. Would we want to go here? Let's all work together on this. Like that kind of shared collaborative culture can exist within the structures that we have. If we want to move in that direction, we don't have to blow everything up. Like we have the capacity to have teachers and students working together. That does not require special materials, special classrooms, special chairs, magical rugs. I mean, you don't need any of those things, right? You just need them in the space and the openness to have those conversations. Where the limiting factor is, and you've said this repeatedly, Laura, the difference between access to education in Cape Town and access to education in Ohio are very different. We certainly have pockets where there's still limited access to technology, especially at home. Yet we've made great strides to minimize those pockets. Very different from what you're experiencing and what your students and teachers are experiencing in Cape Town.
We have some well-resourced schools, and funny enough, during the pandemic, we were actually having collaborations between better resource schools and communities and less resource schools. So Cape Town is actually one of the better ones. I mean, we have many schools, even actually in Cape Town, where there are no desks. They have this thing that's been invented. It's a piece of hardboard, basically. It's like a bean shape. And it's got a little hole in it, so the kids can carry it to and from school, put on their laps to use as desks that they're trying to give to kids because there are no desks. There are schools in our probably our poorest province, Limpopo, that don't have books. They just literally do not have books. They don't have textbooks. They don't have books for kids to learn to write. And technology is a distant dream. So that's why I worry is like it can level the playing field to an extent, but you get to a point where it's just going to leave like a lot of kids in the dust. And so, okay, there's so many thoughts in my mind right now. Let me do them one by one. I saw this amazing video of a young teacher teaching little kids English as a second language in a poor under-resourced school. And he had, I think, 2 chairs. Yes, the children were sitting on the floor because they don't have a lot of chairs, but there were 2 battered chairs, and he had put an old door on the chairs to make like a table. And he was teaching them prepositions, and he would crawl in under the table and say the teacher is, and the children would say under the table, or they're pretending it was a table, and then he would get on top of it and he would say the teacher is, and they would say on the table, So, and it was amazing to see that he was involving them, he was engaging, all the children were laughing and they were engaged. It was amazing. But this works beautifully for little kids. And this is what I was thinking the entire time. Little children. I've seen little children excited to go to school. Even I did, although I don't think it was because I was little. I think it was because of the school. Because as soon as I moved to a different school, I wasn't so happy anymore. I've seen small children excited. It's easy to get small children excited. I mean, you pull faces at a toddler and they're overjoyed. And smallest children, you can do things like that and you can get them involved. But what about when they get older? As soon as they get to high school, learning becomes a lot more passive. And that's where we really need to focus this. I think that's where we need to focus, because that's where we need to focus the participation. It's where we need to focus the technology. It's where we need to focus the teacher training and the participation, because that's where a lot of kids, even they get really good marks up until high school and then just drops off. And it's not because it's not a natural thing. You shouldn't necessarily drop off. But I was chatting to another educator earlier today, and we were discussing how we'd been taught certain things in maths, especially because neither of us had done particularly well in maths. We both took maths and passed it. Some of us a little bit more by the skin of our teeth than others. But I was never taught basic, simple things. I was taught what to do, but not why, or like, and how to do it, but again, not why. So I couldn't connect to it. And I think that's a large part of what's missing. And I think that's what a lot of AI can do, because, like, again, not blaming teachers, but a lot of teachers, they have a certain understanding or intuition, a lot of, and they don't necessarily know how to explain to somebody who doesn't have that. And they don't necessarily know exactly what needs to be done to explain it in different ways, because different kids understand things explained in different ways. They need something to relate it to, an analogy, and that is what AI can do. With that some teachers can't, especially if your teacher is in a very different reality from you. They don't know what you can relate to. For example, if I think of somebody I know who I never understood what trigonometry was for, and I've mentioned this last time, and if you'd explained it to me in terms of woodwork, I still wouldn't have understood. But if you explained it to a friend of mine in terms of woodwork, you would have gotten it immediately.
I'm really glad that you called out kind of that continuum of excitement and happiness in this conversation, because you are right. At the middle school, high school level, once students get beyond primary school, the lessons become more siloed. They move out of classrooms where all subjects occur in the same classroom space, and they go into a traditional setting where all subjects occur in a box. And then the teachers have to work. It's like that extra lift beyond, I'm going to teach my content, but then you have to make the conscious decision of, and I'm going to go out and search for context for my content across all things, and pull that context for my content in, and use my students as one of those tools to find that context. Like, hey, students, you help us put some context around these pieces. Because otherwise it just exists in that box. And then students can't see themselves in the work. They don't see where it connects outside of the box. Students in my middle school and high school classrooms, which were integrated classes for the most part, that's something I always worked to do, would say, well, I don't understand, why are we writing in science? I don't understand, why are we doing math in ELA? I don't understand why. And it's like, well, it's our fault, because we've not asked you to be part of this work, to pull in things that are important and interesting to you, that don't fit in neat little boxes. Back to my interlocking circles. Maybe they would fit in interlocking circles, but they don't fit in isolated boxes. So, I do think that's where, I've looked at attendance data. I spent all day yesterday in an attendance data training, and we were talking about what to see and what patterns to see in attendance, and working with buildings and teachers and administrators around finding stories in this attendance data. And the data that we were looking at, there's definitely a drop off in attendance the older students get.
Mm.
And, why is that would be the question that you start asking. And it's, all these different reasons, but ultimately, the thing that drives students back to a teacher or a learning space is that they feel that they're valued in the work and that they're getting value from the work. You just said that about a position you're hoping will come your way because you value that work and it's work that helps you feel valued. And like thinking about that from this interlocking, bring your perspective to the class. If you do that, I think students feeling heard, teachers feeling heard, using the tech to build connections and push your thinking in spaces that you wouldn't be able to push it yourself, that values everyone as a learner then in the space.
Mm. There's so much to think of here and unpack here. I'm sorry, I have nothing. I'm just I'm just wondering. What I'm wondering now is we're having this conversation, and there are all these amazing possibilities. And what you were saying about just now about sorry, in South Africa just now means an indeterminate length of time before or after. It can mean 5 minutes ago or half an hour from now. Just just putting that out there. So you were talking about the work we need, teachers and students would need to do to make it relatable, different contexts and all of that. And it sounds like it would be an exhausting exercise without AI. But I've seen more and more. There is a lot of excitement around using AI, integrating it into the existing system. So basically it's turning into digital whiteboards. That's what they mean. Or at best, it's creating rubrics for teachers. How do we get from here to a place where learning takes place in education? How do we actually make it happen? That's what I don't know.
Right, that's the question, right? Like, how do you make that shift from substituting to transformative? Because it's scary. It's the standing on the edge of the like diving board and looking out and going, well, I'm going to fling myself off this board and I'm going to make a big splash and I'm not sure what else is going to happen as a result of that. And maybe it's going back to the safe spaces. It is scary to step away from something that has looked the same for so long and to embrace that thing when you can't see the other edge. We're asking people to take a trust fall. Like you're going to pitch yourself into this thing and we don't know what the other edge will look like. And we won't know it. And we may never get to it. It's almost like throwing yourself into this kind of endless iteration of the next thing. Like, we've done this. Wow, this took us way further than we thought we'd ever were going to go. So let's try this. Now we're way farther than we thought we were ever going to go. So let's try this. That, maybe we need to be okay with not having that solid edge on the other side. But back to how do we actually do that? I don't know. I think people just have to start and then talk about it. Like, you can't start quietly in your little, like you and I sitting in our spaces having this conversation. Like, I think we actually have to just start and then share that. And
So
then,
it sounds so insurmountable. I've spoken to some people at the education department, but they can't make like millions or hundreds of teachers change. What do we do? Do we go to the most influential schools and start there? Offer our services as sort of trainers, and I mean that's why I'm saying I don't know how you would actually go about this, because there are so many great ideas out there, but they never come to fruition. And I think it would be such a wasted opportunity if 20 years from now kids are still getting taught the same way they are today.
well,
I want my nephew to grow up and have amazing school experience.
what about the kids? You know, you and I have been in education systems for our lives, significant, for me, a significant amount of time. But kids haven't. So maybe we need to shift our perspective. The work always is, well, what training can we give teachers? How can we support teachers? How can we do this with teachers? When potentially it's, how do we empower kids to push boundaries on what they want their learning to look like? And then provide a safety net for the teachers who go along for that ride.
Yes. But so I think that what we need to do is, if we're going to do that, I think that there needs to be something in place for teachers who actually want to get on that bus, who see, okay, this is what the kids want, this is what the possibilities it offers. Let me go and see what I can do. Let me go and see what I can uncover. But I was actually just thinking, it might not be a bad idea to actually go to some of the schools and say, look, this is what we can offer. I mean, I could go to my old high school. I know that they're trying to transform. They're interested. I still get their newsletter for some reason. And yes, I think that might be a good idea. Like you said, we just need to start. But
Right.
nobody's going to start spontaneously. So let's start. So we've started with my young friend. We've shown her things that she now is excited to show her teachers. The young girl I was talking about.
Right. Which I'm going to
So
try with my young friend tonight.
yes, okay, great. And then maybe we can just disseminate it as far as possible. I want to go to that school and my old high school and say to them, look, this is what I can do. Let me show you. So what I want to show you is what I want to show them.
But what I want to show you is what I've seen. I've seen this and I would like to show it to you. And I want to hear from you what you see when I show you this. Because
Actually, sorry.
I think that's the right question. Like, I have seen this and I want to show it to you. And then what do you see when I show you this? Like, let your brain go. And because I do have the possibility of doing this, Laura, because I am working in the next month, actually with some school districts around generative AI and what this can look like as a teaching partner, as an augmented learning co-creator. So if I'm intentional about that message, they're very interested in how do we stop students from cheating? How do we use it to create lesson plans, which is an entry point, but it's not a transformation.
No.
I think yes, it can do these things. And because it can do these things, what are you going to do with the time that this is freeing up? And the cognitive load that your brain doesn't have to carry so that you can turn your brain to coming up with something innovative or imaginative, or making those connections with students, or like, because you don't have to spend all of your waking hours doing these other things. Like, you can offload those things. So then what will you do with that brain space as a result? Maybe that's the question.
Yes, yes. And then of course there's a conversation to be had on the back off the back of that.
Like, what did you actually do?
No, here, let's brainstorm what you can actually do.
Yes. And hey, generative AI can actually help you in that brainstorming process.
The president of the alumni association type thingy, she is a teacher at the school, and she was actually the only high school teacher I ever had who really explained things really well. I remember her explaining things and relating it to things we could understand in history. She was fantastic, and I think that she would be very much open to. She was an older lady. She'd been teaching for many, many years, and she still had that excitement and that joy. And I didn't take. I don't really. I only had her for 2 years, and then I dropped history because my mom was a historian, and I needed to,
Right.
because I was a teenager, and these things happen. But I remember her explaining veto right to us when she was explaining the war, and she said, okay, here's a story. I just have to tell you this because it was such a great example. And she said, right, imagine you go home today and you walk in the door and you say to your mom, what's for supper? And your mom says, what do you mean? I'm so sick and tired of you kids just like assuming everything gets done and coming right home and just asking what's for supper. Don't you understand? Somebody actually has to cook this food. This is ridiculous. And you say, okay, mom, calm down. Let's go to Spur for supper tonight. Spur is it's like a family restaurant, steak ranch. And she says, okay, great. And then when your dad gets home, you say to him, guess what? We're going to Spur tonight. And he says, do you expect me to pay for that? Absolutely not. Now, okay, yes, stereotype, family roles, housewife, mom, all of that, but it made the point. And she used to love everything.
I think that's a good approach. The alternative, imagine this. What would this be?
We were talking about relating things.
Right, making those connections. And all right, so I'm up for the challenge. If you and I, over the next weeks, intentionally look for opportunities to be disruptive, to challenge and say, this is great that you're doing this. What if you tried this? This is great that you're doing that. Where do your students' voices fit? This is great that you're doing that, but how can you go past this? How can you take that to the next? Like, what would you like to see that's completely different, that isn't necessarily anchored to what you're doing? And here, let me show you, because generative AI can do that with you.
Yes, although all this is great how you're doing this. Let's see how this can help you. I think it's very much like you said, teachers get into this for because they want to do it. So how can AI help you to be the teacher you want to be? So like for this teacher that we had, this history teacher, she really did her best to make it relatable and understandable. If she had AI, she could have, I don't know why they didn't all just listen to her, but if she had AI, she could have done so much more, because she made history class interesting. She made it relatable, to kids who so our grandparents fought in the Second World War, but the first one had nothing to do with us, it was abstract to us,
Yeah, I think that's our challenge for ourselves. So
Yes, let's do something.
let's do something. Let's take some action towards the idea of this co-creating learning spacing and find like-minded people or push on the thinking of the educators or the students that we come in contact with and start to make a difference. I'm up for that. So I'm going to share to close out our time together. We always like to share new things. So I'm up for that. In American language means I'm all on board with that and ready to go.
We
And
use that.
I'm going to hold my thumbs in the hope that we can accomplish that because that's what I learned today from life in Cape Town, that when you are hoping for luck and good outcomes, you don't just cross your fingers, you hold your thumbs. So
So we also say I'm up for that. But yes, I'm going to cross my fingers that we can accomplish something, even if we just set something up for the new year. Because
well,
I think that we can just make plans from now. I think that's enough.
yes,
Because I don't see, I mean, kids are writing exams and things soon.
yes, we can absolutely start moving our thinking forward. So let's hold each other accountable for that in our future conversations.
Let's do that.
Thank you, Laura. And I still have half of my peppermint crisp to finish as I'm doing my work this afternoon. We know that there is so much more to see than what we shared today, and we'd love for you to show us what you see or use our conversation as an opportunity to share what you see with others. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you so much, Char. It has been illuminating and thought-provoking as always.